If you're an average player, you want to be left alone, all right, because you want to be able to slide by. If you're a good player, you want to be coached. If you're a great player, you want the coach to tell you the truth every day. Did I hustle on that play? Did I make the right read? Did I play the guy with the right leverage? You want to know every play, because you know why? They want to be perfect. Everybody here makes a choice to do one of those three things.
Welcome to the GOAT Consulting Podcast, a podcast dedicated to people striving to be a GOAT, the greatest of all time, serving it up in a way that you can get it in all stages of life.
Hey, I'm Colby Jubenville, and welcome to another episode of the GOAT Consulting Podcast right here in studio at VC Productions in Nashville, Tennessee. We got a great show for you today. It's part two with John Dunavan, and we're excited about that. Always at the table, my good friend without his Sprinter. He's left it for his employees to use today. He's building his brand every day now with his own clothing line. The CEO of the GOAT family of brands, Tyler Burnett. Tyler, thank you for being here. And to the left, pausing for the cause, all the way from Brentwood. They call him the LinkedIn Whisperer. He's the calming force to our show. Sometimes he likes to start and stop the show. John Byers. John, so glad that you could be here with us today. Thank you. And to my far left, John Dunavan, who came in and last minute jumped in the boat, the canoe with us. He doesn't like to be called a learning scientist, but he's somebody that helps people succeed through learning strategies. And such a great story in part one of spending time with you. We are the GOAT Consulting Podcast. We serve it up in a way that you can get it. And John, you're helping us do that even more today. In our 20s, they teach us to get in the game. Our 30s, we move up in the game. In our 40s, we try to stay in the game because people like Tyler are that good. Stay with us. In our 50s, we say this is what we really want. We hope we say that today. A GOAT in sports, it's easy to see. It's people that's recognized for their greatness. They elevate the play of those around them. But in business, it's people like John Dunavan that compete on unique perspective, unique education, and unique experience. What they do gives them energy, and it gives other people energy, creating a new levels of challenge and opportunity. And we had some great conversation around how people continue to develop and grow and learn. And you have some real defined thoughts about how you can do that, how you can truly help people learn. We talk about education, and we talk about learning, and we talk about training, and these are words that are used interchangeably. But you believe that there are specific pieces to both the environment and skill sets that are needed in the world today so that people can go out and learn within the environment and then go out and be successful in other environments. And we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, I just want to comment.
You take it from there.
Yeah, I just want to comment. Thank you. Comment once more on the beard. It's beautiful. And I also need to say that if you have not listened to part one of this, please pause, go back and listen. It's worth your time to kind of tee up some of this that we're going to talk about.
Well, and we always love Dev Digital.
They would encourage
us
us to listen to episode one.
Absolutely,
also.
Every step of the way. In fact, if you go back to the first episode here with John, you'll hear about Dev Digital and the great work they do.
Digitizing the world. And by the way, you can listen to that part one episode on any platform that you listen to podcasts. That's or right. iTunes or Google and Amazon and
video,
YouTube.
The list goes on and on.
It's on and on.
Take it from there.
There we go. John, good to have you back.
Thanks.
Thank you. And you teed that up so well, Colby, where you talked about the characteristics and the skill set. So I would love for you to kind of walk us through, and I'm assuming you might start as you did earlier in the 4 characteristics for a learning environment. Share that with us. And where did that come from?
Yeah.
It's really from a lot of research. And it's contained in a variety of different publications, National Academy of Sciences, National Science Foundation funded research that one of my early companies that I was involved in was paid to commercialize. And it was a spin-off of the Learning Science Institute at Vanderbilt University, and they had recently been involved in development of research and publication of a book called How People Learn, Brain, Mind, Experience in School. And it's free. It's available at National Academy of Sciences Press. You can get a PDF downloaded for free. It's everybody paid for it. It's tax dollars. But that gets into the nature of mastery and routine expertise versus adaptive expertise and intuitive performance, things that help differentiate the GOATs within workplaces and teams and things like that. When you think about So when I describe the 4 ingredients that make a learning environment successful and fun and engaging, something that people actually want to participate in, and those can be in workplaces, sometimes in schools, in family environments, but there's 4 ingredients, and those 4 ingredients are knowledge, something that's worth learning, that people actually will help them become successful in whatever pursuit. There's the learner. There is being respectful of what the learner brings to the experience. They're not a blank slate. They've got their own level of experience or knowledge and background, and you want to pull that into the environment so that you respect them as individuals, which makes it engaging. There's assessment. It's finding ways to ask questions and figure out where the audience or that learner is. And with those questions, that helps to calibrate the way you dose and how deep you go on knowledge. Because if you say, you know what, we're talking about baking cakes, everybody here's a baker, we can cut right to we'll go from recipes right into decoration. There's ways that you can adjust the amount of content based on where your audience is coming from, and assessment's the way it gets you there. And then
Community.
Community. There is no self-made anybody. Everything that you learn has to sooner or later be applied in the real world. It could be the workplace, the family, what have you. And without that community, that chance to sort of practice and then get immediate feedback from other members of the community or shared experience from other members of the community, it doesn't stick. It's like watching a TV show and then deciding I'm going to learn how to do something now. Until you have a practice environment, it doesn't work.
That seems.
So you've got, just real quick, knowledge-centric, learner-centric, assessment-centric, and community-centric are the 4 characteristics for learning, creating or having a learning environment.
Yep.
It seems complex. It seems overwhelming when John Byers starts to frame up those centrics. But when you say things like this, something worth learning, tell me and show me an example of something that was worth learning in a case that you used where you said, this is what this audience needs to know.
Oh, that's every engagement I've ever had. That's where we start.
What's worth learning?
What's worth learning, and how are we going to measure success? How we know when we've hit the mark?
Yeah.
And so then it becomes a conversation with leadership and members of the teams to say, what's going to make you successful? So for a large technology services company that's based out in Washington State, had a conversation with them about how they can engage with customers, because their big problem was on the Salesforce side, they would roll up to a school or a company and say, hi, I'm from blank. How much do you want to buy? And what do you know? If other technology companies said, I think we can do a better job, because you're kind of turning off whoever you're talking to. Mm-hmm. You need to think about a solution. So we flipped the culture on that and said, you know what, let's change the way you go about selling your products and services. Yeah. Let's examine who's really good at doing this. And then what they figured out was the people who answered open-ended questions and then sat back and listened were tremendously successful. Superficial credibility, your reputation, who you work with, the background, how you dress, how you act, how you carry yourself, all helps to introduce, create a conversation with whoever you're talking to. You can screw that up by poor tactics.
Well, to me, how I translate what you just said, all that maybe get us to somewhere, to some destination. Mm-hmm. It's not what connects us.
Absolutely.
And I believe that we are all designed. There's probably more than we know how we're like than different. And one of those ways is we are all designed to connect with one another.
Yes.
And what I hear you saying is, well, maybe let me not even say that. Maybe you share, because how do you bring this down to a human level? Because the real environments for learning, as I would connect with it, would be a way that connects me to other people and to relationships. Mm-hmm.
And you can create a learning environment anywhere. It could be a campsite, it could be a family, it could be a workplace. But if you include those 4 ingredients and think in terms of those 4 ingredients, people are going to want to participate. They're going to feel respected. They're going to want to share. It's not a difficult thing to do, and those are the ingredients that when we think about in our own histories, what did I really enjoy learning? All of those ingredients were there.
And you said it's so easy that cavemen can do it, and you also said that learning is about a two-way communication.
Absolutely.
But yet, every learning environment that we see in traditional education delivery methods,
Right.
it's one-way
The
communication.
the Industrial Revolution and World War II
Set the stage.
permanently changed the way learning was done in classrooms. Before that, the one-room classroom or a more Renaissance style of learning that did question or Socratic method. It allowed for question and answer to kind of figure out what people's interests were and then dose the information for them. That was spoiled when during the Industrial Revolution and World War II, we needed people who could go to assembly lines and do tasks.
Yeah.
And so they mistakenly thought, well, we can use an assembly line approach to education as well.
And now when you say respect the learner, what the first thing I think about is if you really want to connect, when John talks about connecting with somebody, the very first thing you have to respect is the amount of technology and the amount of multimedia that they've had access to since the day they were born. And that's what you're competing with on a daily basis and how you connect with them to tell that story. Is that what you mean when you say respect the learner? What does it mean?
Respect the learner is looking at them holistically. There is no blank slate. Everybody has some body of experience they're bringing to the situation.
And to figure out what it is that they bring to that situation and connect with those points in a way that allows them to say, hey, I'm here to help you get better.
It's as simple as asking them an open-ended question to start with.
Yeah.
It's that sort of the flipped classroom, or it's a problem-based learning or case-based learning or challenge-based learning. They're all variations of the Socratic theme. What do you need at this point in time to achieve a particular objective?
Gotcha.
All of this is really being curious.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, it's and again, it's just come up even recently. One of the episodes at the beginning of season 2, we talked about Ted Lasso, and one of the things that came up out of that is how he kind of revived this quote from Walt Whitman around be curious, not judgmental, right?
Yep.
And so all of this is designed around honoring our own curiosity, leaning into our own curiosity, and respecting, others' curiosity along the way. And there's this article that you had sent us, and it talks about when participants were highly curious about a fact, they were 30% more likely to recall it.
Absolutely.
Which on the surface, I mean, that makes sense, but like 30%, is that it? Or is that like, what is it otherwise? Like if we weren't curious, we're being forced to learn something that we would not be curious about, it's much lower.
Oh, yes. If you're not curious about it, and curious is that first level of engagement, that cognitive engagement. If it sparks an interest in you, if it's placed in a context that's meaningful to you, you begin integrating that new information with your own base of experience. So if I ask you a question and frame it in a way that's meaningful to your success, your health and happiness, then you're going to be far more likely to remember it, which is why storytelling is such an effective way for creating engagement with an audience of learners. Storytelling, question and answer is really the key. Once you have, and it doesn't take a lot of time, you can tell a story in 30, 45 seconds, have a beginning, middle, and end, 250 words, and character development. But you've created a problem space or an opportunity that engages the audience emotionally and cognitively.
And that article also said curiosity can also increase our patience, which
Absolutely.
Which is why we love stories, right? Because they engage us, and it, I guess the better the story, the better the storyteller, the more it piques curiosity, the longer we can hang on to that.
Absolutely.
To that story in a way.
So I need to get more curious. My patience sucks. Maybe not.
There we go.
Sorry.
When we first met, the thing that brought me into the fold with the conversation with you, that kept me engaged and kept my curiosity moving forward and kept me be able to be patient and listen and not talk, is that you said that our brains are hardwired to ask questions.
Our brains are a problem-solving engine.
Problems. I'm sorry. Yeah,
That's all we do.
Yeah.
All day long from the time we were born.
Yeah.
It's looking at the world in terms of a problem to be solved, and do I have the tools to do that?
Yeah.
And to what extent do I get those tools supplemented by my environment?
So can we talk about something that's been coming up for me a lot lately is people that finish other people's sentences. And so I want to ask you about this. Like,
He's really on this.
what keeps someone from allowing some other person to let them finish their sentence? Have you studied, researched any of this in your learning? Because I feel like it fits right into curiosity increases our patience. What keeps somebody from allowing someone to finish their sentence and not feeling like they need to get in and insert or finish it for them or try to guess what they're saying?
Outside of an MRI, I couldn't really describe the mechanics of it. But I believe, and probably some research to back it up, is that the human mind is looking for patterns in the data. And so patterns can be conversation, it can be the weather outside, it can be pieces of a jigsaw puzzle on the table, but this problem-solving impulse that people have hardwired into their brain wants them to complete sentences because they think, based on the data that they're given, I know where your story's going. I know how to answer that question for you because my mind's already there. Let's get on the table and go on the next thing.
I don't like it. I don't like it, though.
I know, it's a drag. I'm sorry.
Well, we can talk after class.
But it's pattern. And our brains are hardwired for pattern.
Absolutely. We are pattern recognition engines. We're looking for things we know and don't know from the patterns.
Yeah.
It keeps somebody from being able to be curious, though, right? Like, if I'm curious about what something somebody is saying, I'm not going to try to jump in and guess.
Well, yeah, it can shut off your audience big time. Whoever the participant in the conversation stops being a participant when they get short-circuited by a driver in the conversation. And I've seen it happen plenty of times in leadership development programs I've helped to create, where you bring in the expert, and the expert get in the front of the room and think, my job is to hold forth.
I'm going to share all my pearls with you.
Absolutely, and I don't really care where you are because all my stuff is gold. And the audience is thinking, I want to know how to sell something, or I want to know how to use the photocopier.
Maybe part of the reason you don't like to be called a learning scientist.
It does create a picture in somebody's head that makes them think, wait a second. Have you ever actually been to a job site? If you don't understand what people actually do in the job, and there's a personality, there's a performance I call the everyday expert. We are surrounded by everyday experts, and our job is to help. We can make our lives simpler if we recognize the everyday experts and ask them questions or trust them to get the job done.
Can I ask one other question? Just a personal question I've been sitting with for myself lately, and I've tried to not go there, is to ask the question why, because I read that the United States is one of the only countries in the world where people ask why so much. Every other country views why as an indictment. It's like an accusatory thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to be more attentive to my own self and asking questions, not why, like, why did you do that? Or why this or that? Maybe ask it a little differently, like, what keeps someone from finishing someone else's sentences? Or what keeps someone from allowing someone to finish other sentences, right? Like, as opposed to, why do you do that? Does that make sense? Does that fit into this conversation? Like,
actually, it does, because I've had that conversation a number of times with organizations, particularly global. Global audiences are very, very obviously different because language and culture and things like that. But in America, we have a unique cultural tradition where why is perfectly fine. In fact, we begin with why, because why is the primary method of engagement. If you can
We're taught that.
We are, and it's because as a country we're fairly young, and our culture is all about how do we solve the problems that we're confronted with. We've not inherited too many.
Yeah.
Some basic rules, but how those are applied, we're still a relatively frontier country, and we have a frontier thinking.
I'm finding that there's more ways to engage around what I'm wanting to know with asking why that makes it a more interesting way to ask
absolutely.
it. So like tell me more about that as opposed to why do you do that, right? It's more like I'm trying to find more ways that don't sound in some way accusatory, that maybe gives an invitation to be more free in your response as opposed to more defensive in the response.
What do most people grow up doing? Playing sports, right? We're competitive. So I agree with your approach there. If you come at me with why and I'm being passionate about this is what I do and you're like, why? I'm probably going to come back like this instead of I'm going to compete. Right.
Hey, tell me more about that. Like, tell me, like, what makes you do it that way? Like, what that kind of thing is what I'm trying to get more.
If you just said why, then I'm probably going to compete and pounce. Versus if you said, tell me more about that, I may show you even more passion about why I do that, and then we can get to the bottom of it. But I know that happens in my household. Like if one of the kids or my wife approaches me in a certain way, I naturally compete. Versus pausing and taking in that information and then acting how I want to act versus how I do act. So that's something that I know that I've seen. I go back and say, why did I act like that? And it's because I'm a natural born competitor.
Maybe it's what makes me act like that.
Yeah.
Why?
What about me? What about me? Like, I'm asking these questions of myself, and so when I hear you say it, I'm trying to think of it if in my own the same way, right?
Yeah.
Well, why is invitation for a story? What is a process?
Interesting.
I'm gonna need to sit with that.
It's the tone. Part of it's the tone. If you say, well, why? If you say, well, that's interesting, why? Yeah, it's all in the delivery, but why really is it's focused on circumstances and personal experience, and it's not necessarily saying, tell me your rule-based behavior behind this thing.
Yeah.
It is, well, why would you think that way, or why would you? What was the thought process behind that? But why it's just a different level of interaction.
So you talk about these 5 skills, and I feel like this is kind of all embedded in the very things that we're talking about. Can you walk us through that?
Sure.
And would you describe it as the 5 skill sets that we all need to have, are critical to? I mean, how would you describe it?
National Academy of Sciences and National Science Foundation calls those the 5 21st century skills, and those are the skills that are required to be successful in any 21st century workplace. So,
Okay.
And in fact, there aren't many now that aren't 21st century workplaces because we're all working in teams to solve problems, period. So those 5 21st century skills are, number 1, adaptability.
Okay.
The ability to recognize change and then embrace it. Nonlinear thinking and problem solving. So it's how to think outside the box, how to go beyond the rules. Self-management and self-education. The ability to recognize when you don't understand something, find new information to supply that, and then integrate with your within your experience base. Systems thinking, which is the ability to look at systems and systems of systems and how those systems interrelate, so you understand what your part is or how you can influence a part, and that part influences others to produce an outcome. Mm-hmm. And then complex communication, the ability to take sophisticated problems and break those down into simple terms using a variety of different types of communication, text, voice, written, to then, in an effective manner, communicate with an audience of peers, teammates, or colleagues.
It's amazing how many different formats you see that communication in now in corporate America, Microsoft Teams and Slack and all the different and they're texting and calling and emailing and Slack and I've kind of battled that. How do I better communicate with my entire team? And man, there's just so many different platforms you can go, but almost everybody doesn't like change. And goes back to text and calls. Mm-hmm. That's just what they're comfortable with in a lot of ways.
Keith Ferrazzi, in his most recent book, which is Leading Without Authority, talks about new work rules versus old work rules, right? Yep. And it's also kind of showcased in this article that I've referenced a few times that you sent us. But one of those things is we need to get rid of the terminology "stay in your lane."
Yes.
And he talks about it in this book in such a way that it's get out of your lane, bring value. Old work rule, stay in your lane. New work rule, get out of your lane, bring value. It's almost attached the two together. And I kind of hear that coming out in what you're describing here. What would you say about that?
Well, and I think stay in your lane and stay in your lane, be a team player, understand your role. You know, a lot of those concepts get muddied when actually the intent is, in order to be good at something, you need to practice enough doing that something so that you can do it consistently and intuitively and effectively and efficiently.
Yep.
So that's somewhat a lane, but
Back to your GOAT definition.
Yep.
Yeah.
But systems thinking says you got to understand how all those other pieces fit together. So does obviously I want to stay in my swim lane because I don't want to impinge upon somebody else's performance. And so understanding how their performance and my performance are related and interact with each other. So that's more of a global perspective. So staying in your lane on a performance side is a helpful discipline to think of, okay, this is how I'm going to get good at what I do and do those things. But I have to understand how what I do impacts others and have enough curiosity to say, well, you know what? If I can do this, I can transfer those same skills and that knowledge and that attitude into other areas as well. You don't want to limit thinking because limited thinking allows people to make mistakes. You know, the critical path and the cascade of events are all often because people stay in their lane tremendously effectively to the exclusion of all others, and so the truck drives off the cliff.
Yeah.
Stay in your lane, but know where the interstate's going to take you.
Yeah, that's the way to look at it.
It's like the episode of The Office when Michael and Dwight are driving and he follows the GPS right into the lake because the GPS is saying turn left here, and Dwight's like, don't do it. Like there's a lake in front of it, and he drives right off into the lake.
Exactly.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think some people are better problem solvers than others? Because you said the brain is hardwired to solve problems. What? Any idea? Have you had any research on why some people are better problem solvers than others?
There's a lot of research. So outside of any kind of sort of environmental or physiological challenge, say it's a normal operating system, a lot of it is culture. And that culture is maybe starts at the family and then is nurtured or impeded by formal educational activities, family events, cultural norms.
Wouldn't you say impeded more than cultured? I mean, than cultivated?
Oh, it really depends. I'm not sure it's that universal, but certainly if you look at, there's certainly a lot of research on traditional educational environments.
Well, here's
limiting creativity.
Yeah, I mean, here's the questions, and there's one answer. It's on the back of the book, in page 47.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And that's the education system that most people that are in their 40s and 50s grew up in.
Yes, and that's effective if you're learning the rules, but very poor if you're learning creativity and problem solving.
Yeah,
and how to have adaptive experience.
Absolutely.
But do you think that, Tyler asked a really good question, do you think that problem solving for everyone begins at home and how they're scripted at home to address problems that they find in their own life?
Problem solving starts at birth.
Doesn't everything?
Yeah.
A lot of it is. It's the environment they grow up in. Up until school, that's your entire life.
Yeah.
And so you're getting feedback from your environment constantly. And if someone tells you, you know what, I get that for you.
Yeah.
So one of the ways, John, that we honor our guests, and I'm fascinated to see where this turns into based on this great conversation, but we have this segment that we call The Things We Think and Do Not Say, and it comes from Jerry Maguire at the beginning of the movie. He writes the mission statement, it's not a memo, and it's called The Things We Think and Do Not Say.
Yes.
We usually fill in the gap for the rest of that, but I was inviting you to do it. But
the future of our business.
Future of our business. We kind of talked about this very briefly before the episode. You said something that you talked about the topic of training and how that's not a used thing anymore. Can you talk about, maybe tee that back up and some of the language you use, because I don't want to share all of it. It's fascinating.
One of the third rails in the learning world is the term training. because dogs are trained and people learn.
What does that mean to third rails?
Dogs are trained, people are learned.
On the subway system, that third rail has the power in it.
Okay.
So if you actually find yourself on the tracks of a subway, don't touch the third rail.
Don't touch the third rail.
You pop like popcorn.
Okay. So dogs are trained and people learn.
Yes, and it's training and learning is often, you mentioned earlier on, training and learning is often used interchangeably, and it's not really the same thing.
Yeah.
Because people have a different perspective when they apply the term training. I'm going to train you in something. Well, that discounts what the audience brings to the situation often. If you look at it as a learning activity and as part of a continuum of learning across your life, I'm going to help you learn a new skill, a new task, a new process, and I'm going to help you integrate that with other things that you do. It's not a discrete event. Training is often considered a discrete event. It's time-bound, it's got an outcome, it assumes you know nothing and that you're a widget in the system, and I'm going to give you just the right stuff and not encourage you to think creatively about how are you going to use that.
It's a cool concept because I'm promoting a guy on Friday, and his title was going to be Master Trainer. So quick story. He was an installer, became a project manager. Now we have 5 crews, and he performs better than anybody else.
Yep.
So I want him to spend time with each crew.
Yeah. So he's been a master learner.
Yes,
is what you're saying.
Yes, yeah. And he brought experience from the outside. Like he's our best equipment operator, but he's taken that skill to operate the equipment and learn how to operate the team and performs better at operating his install team. So I think that if I leave him in that role, he's an individual contributor, and I want our company. We're only as good as our weakest link.
Yep.
So I want to make him the trainer, master trainer. That's kind of what I was gonna.
What about learning engagement director or some sort? Is that
not
too
in
much?
the artificial grass world? This is not insurance.
It could be director of development. It could be employee success. There's lots of ways you can cast that says, you know what, it's a part of a continuum.
But I kind of want him to be when I get a new hire, that's part of my system is that if he's got some of the obviously he's going to have to continue learning all the time, but if they learn from him, boy, aren't they after week 6 set up for a whole lot more success. And then as we continue to grow, he trains somebody too, and now we have 2 of those people. But it's interesting. It's interesting we're talking about this when I'm about to make this change, and it could impact that decision.
And you're not alone. I mean, so much of the work that I do and working with HR departments and teams and the C-suite, like every company has a training, and they most likely 90-some% of them call it that.
Yep.
So the things we think and do not say is maybe you're creating something there and calling it that is unnecessary and not as effective or connected or efficient with your people, right?
Yep.
Like
absolutely. It's one, as we talked earlier on, the terms we use, the environments we create, whether verbal or not, or explicit or not, create a picture in somebody's head. So when you say, hey, congratulations, welcome to the organization, you can be trained on Monday, that kind of said, you may not actively think about it, but you think, well, wait a second, I had a lot of experience when I got here. What is this? I'm not a blank slate. Now, if you're going to help me move into an organization, become successful in an organization, develop new skills in an organization, wow, you got my attention.
All right.
That goes back to that respect for the learner.
Exactly.
One of the final ways we are going to tap into the John Dunavan persona, peel back another layer of the onion, all the analogies. We're going to ask you to share with us a few of your top songs.
I want to apologize to you.
Oh.
I just finished your sentence.
You did. Like I said.
Tough crowd.
Can you share with us some of your top songs? Call it 3, call it 5. Top 5 songs you couldn't live without.
Well, first of all, the format's LP.
Yeah. Going back.
Okay.
Friction makes music.
Yes.
Well, that's
or
true.
Music makes friction. Which one is
That's
it?
true on so many
Marvin
levels.
Gaye would flip that.
Listen, guys.
Podcast
we've
number
got
3.
Davey here. Okay? Thank you.
Mikey.
Tender years. I love Crowded House.
A man after my own heart.
So, so many great, and Van Morrison,
he's good.
Moon Dance, Brown Eyed Girl.
I'm going to listen to some Crowded House on the way home, and I'm just going to go back.
Yep.
Keep going.
Beatles' White Album.
Oh, yeah.
And I like songs that are stories.
Yeah.
Too much repetition.
Well, that's the thread for you, right?
It really is.
You think about your childhood memory.
Yep.
Right? I mean, there's a gigantic, one of the all-time great
Yep.
events, stories, right? Landing of the moon. Your definition of a goat, right? I mean, all the way up to this is
You're working
surprising.
videos and music videos saying,
Creating
hey, guys,
that story?
we got to make a story here. There's such an opportunity.
Absolutely. And another one of those sort of key events in my early development was helping to produce some music videos and
For Garth Brooks, by the way, right?
yeah, did his first video, did some George Strait work and others, and trying to push the creative envelope. Say, you know what, we're set, we're lit. We can make this a bit more of a fun story for the viewers, so that every time they come back to it, it's a little something different.
And they fought you on this.
Oh yeah, they said, John, this is TV. This isn't art. Wow, that's too bad because you're really cutting yourself short there.
And then look what videos became.
Oh yeah.
They became movies within movies with stories within stories.
Yeah. Well, think about the commercials you see on TV.
Oh,
the
yeah.
great commercials
Yeah.
are 15 to 30-second stories with a full character development, plot, resolution.
Yeah.
Geico commercials are fantastic
That's right.
for that reason.
It is, and it's amazing, and they're short, and they're captivating,
Yeah.
and I love it.
Well, we've got
Get out of your
we've got to
lane.
land the Southwest Plain here, and
We need 10 more parts to
we absolutely do. And when you're out there, make sure that you train your dogs and learn your people.
Yeah, learn them.
As you would say.
Learn 'em.
John, we really appreciate you taking the time to jump in and be with us in
Thank you.
as John Byers would say, in the bosom of the Goat Consulting Podcast.
You're now in.
You're now in the bosom. And for Tyler Burnett
Was his mother goat?
and for John Byers and John Dunavan and Davey and Dev Digital, I'm Colby Jubenville, and this is the Goat Consulting Podcast.
Oh.